Most Scratch tutorials show you flashy stuff that has no place in a real-world club set. Today, I'm going to show you 3 scratches that actually work in real DJ sets. They're simple, they're musical, and you can perform them with songs that the crowd will actually know. If you DJ in clubs and you want your scratching to sound more natural, then this video will save you a lot of trial and error. My name is Blakey, I'm a DMC champion. Let's get into it. Okay, so for this video, we're going to be using the DDJ Rev 7 with Serato. Now, there's one thing we must make sure that we have set correctly in the Serato settings before we get started, and that is the crossfader curve. So let's head over to the settings in Serato, and then under the Mixer tab, make sure that the crossfader curve is set all the way to fast. Now, the DDJ Rev 7 actually has a physical crossfader curve dial, so I need to set that to the fastest setting. If your controller doesn't have a physical crossfader curve dial, then just do it inside the software in the mixer settings. Now, when it comes to adding scratching to your club sets, the key is to keep it simple, not overdo it, and not overcomplicate it. The scratching has to complement the songs that you're playing, and most importantly, it has to sound good. And we're going to be focusing on those principles in this video. I'm going to show you 4 different types of club scratches. We're going to start with beginner, then move on to intermediate, then I'll show you a pro level scratch, and then we'll do something that's more DMC level. For the beginner example, I'm going to be using the instrumental of Shook Ones by Mobb Deep, which is a classic boom bap hip hop instrumental. And I'm going to be scratching different parts of the a cappella right at the start of Notorious B.I.G. Hypnotize, which is another massive hip hop track. On Hot Q1, I've got this vocal sample here. Hot Q2. Hot Q3. And then Hot Q4 is set right at the beginning of the chorus. So after scratching these vocal sounds, I'll then drop into the chorus and let that play.
Biggie, 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 can't you see?
Now, first of all, I will show you the scratch techniques that I'm going to be using, and then I will perform the scratches and I'm going to slow it right down so that you can follow along at a slower pace. And then after that, I'll go into the scratch performance at full speed. Now, for this beginner scratch, we're only going to be using 2 of the most simple scratch techniques available, the baby scratch and the forward scratch. Now, the baby scratch is simply moving the jog wheel backwards and forwards rhythmically in time with the track. So all you need to do for the baby scratch is turn the crossfader on and you just move the jog wheel forwards and backwards with no movement whatsoever on the crossfader. You want to make sure you keep your hand around the 9 o'clock position and don't take your hand off the jog wheel. Keep your hand on the jog wheel, move the sound forwards and backwards in a rhythmical way. That right there is the baby scratch. Now, the baby scratch can sound really good when it's done correctly and with good timing. You don't need to be a DMC level scratch DJ to add scratch into your club sets. You just need to abide by a few simple rules. Let's play a little piece of this instrumental and I'll show you some baby scratches over the top. The baby scratch is the most simple scratch technique that you can possibly learn, but it can sound great when it's done right. Practicing the baby scratch until you can perform it cleanly is so important before you move on to any other scratch technique. So if you're a beginner, stick with the baby scratch until you're confident that you can perform it flawlessly. The second scratch technique that we're going to be using for this beginner example is called the forward scratch. Now, the forward scratch brings the crossfader into play. So what we do is we make sure that we have our hand around the 9 o'clock position right at the beginning of the sound that we're scratching. And then all we do is we turn the crossfader on and we let the sound play by taking our hand off the jog wheel. And then when we get to the end of the sound, you need to put your hand back on the jog wheel to stop the record. So you put your hand on the jog wheel to stop the sound around this position here. And then crucially, we close the fader and then we bring the sound back to the start of the sound. And because we've closed the crossfader, we can't hear the reverse of the sound. So let's do that a few more times. Crossfader on, let go of the sound. Put your hand here to stop the jog wheel after the sound has played. Close the fader, bring the sound back to the start. And then again, fader on, let the sound play, stop the jog wheel, close the fader, bring the sound back. Even though these two scratch techniques are super simple, they are the basics and the foundation of all other scratch techniques. So if you're a beginner, focus on these two techniques before moving on to anything else. Now let's take a listen to this beginner example, but we're going to slow it right down and I'll show you on screen which scratch techniques I'm performing. So now let's take a listen to the beginner example at full speed.
Biggie, 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 can't you see? Sometimes your words just hypnotize me. And I just love your flashy ways. I guess that's why they broke and you're so paid. Biggie, 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 can't you see? Sometimes your words just hypnotize me. And I just love your flashy ways. I guess that's why they broke and you're so paid.
Now, if scratching is something that you really want to level up at, I've got a full course called the Ultimate Scratching Course where I break down everything step by step. There are already over 1,000 DJs in there sharing routine ideas and helping each other level up. If you want proper structure and real progress, then just hit the first link in the description to check it out. Okay, for our intermediate example, we're going to be using a scratch technique called the chirp scratch. And I'm going to be scratching this super recognizable piece of vocal from the beginning of 50 Cent in the Club.
Go shorty, go shorty, go shorty, go shorty, go shorty.
Now the chirp scratch is probably my favorite scratch to perform in an actual club set because it sounds great, it's not too complicated, and it is so versatile. You can use it with any genre. So let me break down exactly what the chirp scratch is. So we're going to be performing the chirp scratch on the word go.
Go shorty, go shorty.
Now the chirp scratch actually begins with the fader open like this. And just like the baby scratch and the forward scratch, we want to get our hand around the 9 o'clock position right at the beginning of the sound that we're going to be scratching. So that's perfect. As long as your hand is around this position here at the beginning of the sound, you're good. So we start with the fader open, and what we do is we push the sound forward, and before we get to the end of the sound, we're going to close the fader. Let me show you. So we start with the fader on. We're going to push the sound forward, and then we turn the fader off like that. And then what we do is we perform the same thing in reverse. We're going to bring the sound back, and just before we get to the start of the sound, we're going to turn the fader back on, like this. So let me perform that a few times, nice and slow, so you can see what I'm doing. So the movement on the jog wheel is exactly the same as the baby scratch, but by making this fader movement, we're essentially making a tighter sounding baby scratch. Now the reason I'm using this piece of vocal from the beginning of 50 Cent in the Club is it gives something to the crowd that they can recognize. And it's always a good idea when adding scratching to a real club set to use tracks that people know and that people will recognize. And the simple reason for that is it helps bring the crowd into the technical skills that you're showcasing. If you start using obscure tracks that the crowd don't know and you're performing intricate technical scratching or even simple scratching, it isn't going to land the same. So when you're planning on adding scratch into your club sets, try and use songs, phrases, and pieces of vocal that the crowd are going to be familiar with and that they're going to understand. This is going to make the crowd respond to and appreciate what you're doing way more. Now let's take a listen to the full scratch, but I'm going to slow it right down so that you can see exactly what I'm doing.
Go shorty. Go shorty. Go shorty. Go shorty. Go shorty. It's your birthday. We gon' party like it's your birthday. Go shorty. It's your birthday. We gon' party like it's your birthday. Go shorty. It's your birthday. We gon' party like it's your birthday. We gon' sip Bacardi like it's your birthday.
Okay, now let's take a listen to this intermediate scratch at full speed.
Go shorty. Go shorty. Go shorty. Go shorty. Go shorty. It's your birthday. We gon' party like it's your birthday. Go shorty. It's your birthday. We gon' party like it's your birthday. Go shorty. It's your birthday. We gon' party like it's your birthday. We gon' sip Bacardi like it's your birthday. And you know we don't give up.
Hey, well that's exactly where the nigga came from.
Okay, so for our pro level example, we're going to stick with the chirp scratch, but we're going to be performing it at a higher speed with more intricacy. Now for this example, I've got a loop of instrumental of a track by Pop Smoke called Dior. So it's 71 BPM, which is the same as 142 BPM, and it's a drill instrumental. And I'm going to be scratching pieces of vocal from the track Humble by Kendrick Lamar.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
In my opinion, performing the chirp scratch at a higher speed like this sounds awesome when it's done correctly and with precision. I also have two pieces of vocal from the Kendrick Lamar track, which I'm going to trigger after performing the chirp scratches. These are the two pieces of vocal that I'm going to trigger.
Sit down, be humble. Sit down, be humble.
Now I'm going to apply a little bit of reverb when I start triggering these hot cues, and you'll hear why. It will just help fill out those little vocal snippets.
Sit down, be humble. Sit down, be humble.
Here's what those chirp scratches sound like at a faster speed.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Then after I've triggered the sit down, be humble vocals, I'm then going to reverb out the Pop Smoke track, and then I'm going to drop into the beginning of the Kendrick Lamar track.
Nobody pray for me. It been a day for me.
This is a great part of the Kendrick track to jump to because everybody recognizes it and they know immediately what the track is that you've started playing. So now let's take a listen to this pro level scratch, and I'm going to slow it down so that you can follow along more easily.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Sit down, be humble. Sit down, be humble. Sit down, be humble. Sit down. Nobody pray for me. It been a day for me.
Okay, now let's take a listen to the pro level transition at full speed.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Sit down, be humble. Sit down, be humble. Sit down, be humble. Nobody pray for me. It been a day for me.
Okay, and finally for our DMC level transition, I'm going to be scratching in a track by Notorious B.I.G. called 10 Crack Commandments, which begins with numbers being counted. Take a listen.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's the 10 crack commandments. Wow.
Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set 8 different hot cues on each number. And I've already done that. So let's take a listen to each one of the hot cues.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
So I've got numbers 1 to 8 on the hot cue pads 1 to 8. And the truth is, there is an infinite amount of creativity possible using these hot cues. And I'm going to show you in a moment what's possible. Now on the other deck, I've got the instrumental for Mobb Deep, Put Them in Their Place. One of my favorite hip hop instrumentals of the 2000s. So now let me show you quickly what it's like to scratch each number and then trigger different numbers with the hot cues. There really is so much that you can do with this style, and that's why it's the DMC level transition. The creative possibilities are endless.
1, 2, 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, 6, 7, 7, 8, 9, 8.
You could even just trigger the hot cues without scratching whatsoever.
1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, 5, 6, 6, 7, 7, 8, 8, 7, 7, 6, 6, 5, 5, 4, 4, 3, 3, 2, 1.
Even if you're not a really technical DMC level scratch DJ, you can still use this track and these hot cues to perform some more simple scratches. So now let's take a listen to my version, and I'm going to slow it right down so that you can follow along easily.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's the 10 crack commandments.
Now let's take a listen to it at full speed.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 7, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's the 10 crack commandments. Wow.
So there you go. There are 4 scratch transitions that are perfect to drop straight into your own club sets. If you want to take these transitions and copy them completely, that's totally fine. They're guaranteed to add some skill and flair to your own sets. But it's also a good idea to use these transitions as inspiration to come up with some of your own. You can take all of these principles, such as using tracks that the crowd already know and love, using simple scratch techniques but performing them flawlessly, and ensuring that your scratch performances don't go on for too long. You can use all of those points as inspiration to then dig through your own library and come up with some of your own transitions. If you found this video helpful and you want to check out some more scratching tutorials from me, a DMC champion, then I've got this entire playlist right here that is full of videos that will level up your skills super quick. My name is Blakey. Thanks for watching.